welcome you all to Trek Wars. Today we're going to be talking about the New Orleans class, which is seen in the 2060s. The New Orleans class is a 340 meters. It has a crew of 500. It has 10 Type 10 phasers, 3 torpedo tubes, shields of 1,755,000, a hull of 485,000, getting a full defense value of 2,240,000. This ship is based off Galaxy class parts and was a hybrid version between the Galaxy class and a smaller variant of the Galaxy class. So what you see on the Galaxy class, all these experimental technologies were actually experimented and were created and were basically finalized on these New Orleans classes. So this means that the New Orleans class was probably the most advanced frigate class in Starfleet during its production. Some other interesting facts about this ship is the ship was capable of warp speeds of 9.3 for 12 hours, and it had a cruising speed of warp 6. Another interesting thing I found is that this ship was given to only the most qualified captains, and so some of the captains that you had seen that were actually on this ship were some of the Starfleet's finest captains. And I thought this was a pretty interesting thing that I didn't pick up on until actually reading the Eagle Moss magazine. The New Orleans class had slightly less powerful engines and armament compared to the Galaxy class 2. The warp engines of the New Orleans class gave it a top speed of warp 9.3, sustained for 12 hours, and a cruising speed of warp 6. It was equipped with a high-capacity shield grid. So that's one of the things that I thought was pretty interesting, that if you see any of my previous discussions about this ship, I really didn't know that it had a shield that was equivalent to a Galaxy class. That's pretty amazing. Now, there's some certain things about this design that don't really make a whole lot of sense to me. So, number one is the torpedo modules. Like, why are these torpedo modules on the outer rings of the ship? Because that means that they're going to be easy targets. So if the shields go down, you could easily hit those, and then obviously you could have a serious issue when your torpedo bay is being directly shot and it's attached to your hull like that. Because like the Enterprise and most other Federation starships, the torpedo module is built and is protected within housing of the ship's armor, right? But this is just out there in plain view to be shot, which is really strange to me. So I haven't found anything that actually talks about what kind of actual torpedo tubes this thing has, but when you look at the size of the torpedo modules that are on this, I have a feeling that this, and this is just my opinion, is that this ship was, like they said, it's for long-range exploration and testbed technology for the Galaxy class, right? What if those are your multi-shot torpedo tubes? What if this is the first variant of those? I mean, it's really, really large, and then, eventually they get the technology down, they make it a little bit smaller, and they get to the point where they can put it into the neck of a Galaxy class. This is just a theory I have. So, if this theory is correct, this thing could possibly launch 30 full-ton torpedoes. So that's like 5,130,000 points of damage. So that means it could easily fire upon 3 Galors, blow their ass to smithereens, and just move on. So that's where my issue comes in, because what Eagle Moss is telling me the ship could do and what we see and what we're hearing doesn't match the capabilities that are described in the Next Generation. So the way the Cardassians viewed the Nebula class, right, was this state-of-the-art ship. They had never seen anything like it. But if they have seen New Orleans classes, not only have they seen this, but they've seen ships with equal capabilities, if not greater capabilities, which is not the case. So that makes me think that the New Orleans class isn't as advanced as what Eagle Moss says, and that doesn't match what the Cardassians or what the captains of this ship were projecting. Because my understanding, if I remember the episode right, when they were talking about how they were engaged by the Cardassians, I think they were engaged by 2 Galors, and they ended up running away. If this ship was as powerful as it is, it could have blown up those Galors with no problem at all and not needed to run away. So the impression that the Chief O'Brien gave about the situation, we want to try to make it where it kind of resembles more of what they would be fighting something that would not be overwhelmingly strong, and the Cardassians could think that they could possibly take on, basically, is what I'm trying to get at. So we know we've seen Federation use single shot. We know that they have the MK80, but we also know that they have a 4-shot. So I'm wondering if these are like a mid between the technologies of the single shot and then the multi-10 shot, and maybe these things are only firing, because we've seen ships like the Saber firing 4 photon torpedoes. So we know that there are 4-shot torpedoes in the Federation, and so I'm thinking maybe that these large modules are actually 4-shot torpedo modules, which would bring it down to 2,052,000, which is still pretty high. But at least it's not, they're not destroying 3 ships, one barrage kind of thing. And then I started thinking, like, okay, well, what's the purpose of these big, giant modules? So the ship's primary role isn't for combat. It's actually for deep space exploration, okay? So if it's deep space exploration, what if it's really the focus of this is on, instead of torpedoes, it's like beacons or, probes or something along those lines, like something that's not combat oriented. But when the fighting broke out, because this thing was, able to launch several probes at once, they retrofitted those modules to, launch torpedoes. I mean, it could launch torpedoes, obviously. And so it became a very effective, long-range artillery vessel because of that. It would make sense. And, going from a single shot to 4 shots is a lot of firepower still. Now, when we talk about the shielding and stuff like that, we know that shields, there are different shield frequencies and power levels all throughout different Federation starships, which I've talked about. And I want to show you guys what I think would be a more reasonable evaluation of the ship. So with that, I decided to bring some of the technology down because it seems just overwhelmingly powerful for a frigate. So the Defiant, which is kind of a frigate itself in a way, its original shielding was 1,040,000. So I think that that's a pretty reasonable shielding. It's good, but it's not overwhelmingly powerful. And then the hull value is now 238,726. And how I got that is the actual mass of the ship is very low. It's only 900,000. So it's a very small ship. So, and then we look at the armor rating, would be 0.2, same as the Galaxy class, because that's what they were building. That's the armor ratio they were using during this time period. So, a 0.2 armor, and then the defense value is 1,278,726. It really brings the stats down a lot, like almost by half, right? And so the ship is powerful, but it's not going to be as powerful as the Nebula. And so it makes the Nebula still seem like a reason why the Cardassians were shocked when they saw it. Right, because we all remember, Captain Picard, and then the Galor warship lost to a Nebula with no shields, right? And they're like, oh my god. And then, basically Starfleet's like, I told you so, kind of thing. If the ship had the defensive capabilities that I first showed you, there is no way the Cardassians would have ever thought they had a chance against attacking the Federation. There's just no way. And the Cardassians are a very smart people. They're not stupid. Yes, people can say they're arrogant, but there's a difference between just being arrogant and plain out stupid. And the Cardassians have always respected Federation power, right? After we saw the incident with the Nebula class starship. Before this, they were kind of pushy, and they felt like they could take on the Federation. And if they came across a New Orleans class starship, there's no way they would have had this perspective. I mean, if the New Orleans was, having these Galaxy class stats, like there's no way that they would have, even thought about for even a second attacking the Enterprise, right? Like we've seen, in the episode with the Phoenix. It just doesn't make any sense. So I'm trying to, in universe, explain things with Federation technology that can bring it down to a level where this ship is not OP, because it's absolutely OP if it has, firing 30 full-time torpedoes. I mean, that's just an insane amount of firepower, right? I mean, 30 full-time torpedoes coming at you. That's just insane. So, I mean, overall, basically, the New Orleans class is definitely, a top-of-the-line starship. I just don't think it was as strong as I portrayed it at first. I think that the modifications that I added to it, they fit in universe, and they make the ship, it's definitely strong, but it's not giving it that complete and utter OP formula. So, I mean, the fact that the hull value, or the hull is only, the weight of the ship, the mass is 900,000, means the ship is really small. It's a very small starship, so it's not really going to be, it's a frigate, and frigates are supposed to be small, and the ship's supposed to be produced on mass scale, and that's exactly what they did. I really like the design. I think it's a pretty cool ship. I think in universe it makes a lot of sense, because if you're going to be doing long range exploration and you're going to be putting satellites out there for communication purposes and all these other things out there and beacons and stuff, these modules full of a bunch of beacons, and then you can go out and do your little job flying out into space, checking the universe and dropping off what you need to create relays and stuff. Makes a lot of sense. So for that reason, I think the ship is a really good in-universe design. It makes a lot of sense to me, and I really like it. Like I said, I think it's a really powerful ship. It's a powerful frigate. I mean, that's the way it's portrayed, and it should be that way. I just don't think it's the super powerhouse that I was showing you guys. I think that this, is using more accurate data. And this is the actual portrayal of the ship, and it will fall in universe with the explanations of the performance levels that we see during the Cardassian border wars. So with that being said, every time there was a combat situation, the Federation was engaging enemies like the Borg, the situation with the Romulans at the border, with the Klingon Civil War, these ships were participating in those fleets at every engagement. So anytime Starfleet was wanting to bring firepower to a fleet, they were bringing New Orleans classes. So New Orleans classes were viewed as a high asset to the Federation, and their modularity with their torpedo tubes was probably the main reason why they were put in combat roles, being such a small ship, to bring that extra firepower to the fleet. So the ship would probably be extremely maneuverable, and it would have a lot of long-range offensive capabilities. And then if an enemy breaks through the line and gets to the New Orleans class, it is definitely equipped to take on smaller ships, larger ships, anything that comes through and breaks through that line. This ship has 10 Type 10 phasers, which are state-of-the-art at the time. So this ship is packing a heavy punch. And I kind of think that this was intentional because they knew that the ship was going to be in deep space by itself, and it needed to be able to defend itself from basically anything that's going to be coming after it. It's not going to have any support. This ship can operate by itself completely and utterly fine. So usually when I talk about ships and the way they're used, I always kind of have my own opinion about how they should be used and something that would be more effective. When it comes to the New Orleans class, I think the Federation used this ship absolutely completely appropriate. I think it's great for long-range exploration. It's equipped for it. It's got everything it needs. It's also, I think, could be a fantastic border ship, because you can keep your galaxies out in the extreme deep space. And then these guys can be more around, Federation territory, exploring, doing their thing, dropping probes up, doing the things that New Orleans do. I think that this ship would have been terrifying in combat with the Cardassian nonetheless. So when I think about the border wars, I know that this ship would have actually been terrifying to the Cardassians, because you have a ship that can blow you away from such a far distance with its torpedo modules would have been really scary for the Cardassians. So, but the thing is, though, yeah, this would be the ship of Cardassian nightmares. The only other ship that would really come close to this is them dealing with an ambassador. But an ambassador is a slower moving target. It's a bigger target. It's easier to hit. It's an older ship. It's got Type 8 phasers. So, I mean, Type 8 phasers are not particularly that fantastic. So a lot of those ambassador classes are pretty old, and they're formidable, but they're not going to be absolutely terrifying like the New Orleans class. I don't think very many New Orleans classes were actually in the border wars, honestly. And the reason I say that is they're even if the lower stats that I gave them, they're still enormously powerful. And my opinion is that the Starfleet was sending Mirandas, Constitutions, and ambassadors, very few ambassadors, but they were mostly sending, I would say, like old Kirk-era generation ships, because if they lost them, they were kind of testing what the Cardassians were. When they realized what the Cardassians were nothing really to fear, they kind of were just like, you know what, we'll just send a trash fleet over there to deal with this. We'll keep our good stuff at home in case the Romulans attack us, kind of thing, is my perspective. Because the Federation does have a lot of disputes and stuff, and they want to keep those good ships, you know, in the back lines, protecting, obviously their stations and things of that nature, and trading ports and shipyards and all that kind of stuff. So this is my opinion about the New Orleans class. Is yes, I think that it was definitely in the border wars. Obviously, I don't think there were that many of them. I know some people kind of see that they are, because if they were, I think the Cardassians would have settled or wouldn't even bothered trying to engage the Federation at all, because they would have been that scared. Because the way they reacted to the nebula, obviously they were, from the point of finding the Phoenix, every single Cardassian interaction was always extremely scared of Federation technology. I mean, when you think about it, there's no point that Cardassians ever engaged any Federation starship that you see after that point without having a 2 to 3 advantage, because they knew better. And that's one of those things that we need to take in consideration when we're talking about this ship, is we know how the Cardassians viewed it, and they didn't view this ship as the overwhelming superpower like the Nebula. So this ship is obviously not going to be as strong as the Nebula, because if it was, they would have been shocked by the power output of a Nebula-class starship. So that's my opinion about this starship, because, it's not like they were like, oh my god, when they came across New Orleans classes. Thank you for watching Trek Wars. If you like this material, please subscribe and make a comment. And with that being said, victory is life.